even people who eat meat, organ meats are still intimidating to a lot of people. They're still almost taboo for a lot of people. There's still this concept that if you didn't grow up eating it, it's strange and extreme and gross. While I have to preface that, of course, in most of the world and through most of history, it's been absolutely normal and commonplace.
From the Weston A. Price Foundation, welcome to the Wise Traditions podcast for wise traditions in food, farming, and the healing arts. We are your source for scientific knowledge and traditional wisdom to help you achieve optimal health.
Hey, Hilda here. Many of us know by now how good organ meats are for our health, but we may still find them intimidating to work with or just straight up repugnant. This is episode 382, and our guest today is Ashleigh Vanhouten. Ashleigh is a health coach and the author of one of the first organ-only cookbooks. It's called It Takes Guts. Today, Ashleigh gives us tips on how to actually begin not only preparing, but also enjoying these nutrient-dense foods. She gives us examples of the best-tasting organs to start with. Hint, not liver. And she talks about how we can really draw out and enjoy the flavors. She also explains the superpower benefits of incorporating these foods into our diets on a regular basis. Ashleigh also gives us a sneak peek into some of her favorite recipes, including chocolate blood pudding. All in all, Ashleigh teaches us how to get gutsy and step out of our comfort zone in today's episode. She explains that she knew nothing when she started, which is why she knows that anyone can do it. Before we dive in, I want to invite you to the Wise Traditions Conference in just a couple of months. It's the conference that nourishes in every way. This year, it's going to be held in Knoxville, Tennessee, October 21st to the 23rd. Amazing speakers are a part of the lineup, including Janine Farzan, who is going to speak about organ meats, by the way, and many folks who've been featured on this podcast. Sally Fallon-Morell, the president of the foundation, Tom Cowan, the vice president, Kelly Brogan, Tommy John, and many more. I wouldn't miss it for anything. Come and join me. Go to wisetraditions.org and register today while the early bird pricing is still in effect. I think that expires like September 10th or something like that. So go to wisetraditions.org now, and I'll see you there. And a quick shout out to Upgraded Formulas. A lot of us spend a boatload on supplements each month. Have you ever thought about how useful it might be to know exactly how much of what you're taking is being absorbed into your body and incorporated into the right place? Would you like to know if you're missing any nutrients or maybe getting too much of anything? Well, today I'm bringing you a chance to accurately test all of that. I'm talking about Upgraded Formulas, Upgraded Hair Test Kit, and consultation, and they're minerals which absorb really, really well so that you can vanquish any of those hidden deficiencies that are affecting your thyroid health, your adrenals, or much more. I just sent in my hair test kit, and I can't wait to get the results and go over them with one of the experts on their staff. You can do the same. Just go to upgradedformulas.com and save 20% on your first purchase with the code WISE at checkout. Test, don't guess. Go to upgradedformulas.com and save 20% on your first purchase, again, using the code WISE. This is Holistic Hilda, and you're listening to Wise Traditions. Welcome to Wise Traditions, Ashleigh.
Thank you so much for having me. I am pumped to be here.
I love your cookbook. It Takes Guts. First of all, super clever name. Second of all, you really made the information accessible for wannabe cooks. And actually, that reminds me, it surprised me that in your book, you called yourself an inexperienced wannabe chef. What the heck? How did you even write this cookbook then?
Yeah, I love that you asked that question because I feel like people skirt around that subject. They're like, you're not even really a chef and you wrote this cookbook. Like, what's up? I love that you ask it. The reason I wrote this cookbook is because I wanted to learn more about how to incorporate these foods into my diet. And I really wanted to show people, because I believe so strongly that nose to tail eating and organ meats are a healthful and important part of a diet. I wanted to show people that you don't have to be an experienced trained chef, because in my knowledge, through my research, the only cookbooks out there that actually address organ meats tend to be from very experienced trained French chefs, maybe Italian. And these books are like open to page 1 and cook tripe. And people are like, what even is tripe? What do I do with this? I don't know what you're talking about. It's very intimidating. It can seem really out of reach. And so I wanted to create a resource for people that was welcoming and accessible and that like truly, truly shows it's a cliche, but like if I can do it, you can do it. I have no special skills or background in this stuff. And so if I can learn and I can kind of put myself out there a bit, and of course there was research and experimentation and trial and error, but if I can do it successfully and make these meals delicious and enjoyable and not blow up my kitchen, like you absolutely can too. So, I mean, maybe I'm not so much of a wannabe anymore, but I definitely started out that way.
You said trial and error. Tell us one of the errors, because that always makes me feel better.
Well, it's funny, because I wouldn't say I really had a ton of errors. I mean, certainly I had some recipes that like didn't turn out great the first time around, but I think some of the funnier stories I have with recipe developing for It Takes Guts revolves around sourcing some of these organ meats and some of the like interactions that I had trying to get ingredients, because I had to really make friends with some butchers and some farmers and like ask some questions. And some of the organs or cuts or ingredients weren't as easy to find. And I do remember really vividly a day when I was doing some recipe development around blood. And I was making some blood pudding, different types of blood pudding. And I went to a local butcher and, I kind of went in there like friendly enough and I asked for some calf's blood. And the butcher looked at me like I had asked for human blood, And I'm thinking like, if you're a butcher and you are thinking I'm nuts, like this is why this stuff is intimidating for people. And this is why it's not used or incorporated as much as it could be, because we're scared to ask. People aren't used to it. Like I got to the point with that butcher shop, I got to say, where they knew that I was kind of like the kooky organ meat lady and they liked me and we became friends, and they would end up giving me like stuff for free. For example, like I was recipe developing some like chicken skin chips, which are very delicious, by the way, in the air fryer. And I would go and I'd ask about it. And they're like, just take this chicken skin. Like nobody wants it. Just have it. How am I going to charge you for this? Just take it. Because people are going and asking for like skinless chicken breast.
Yes.
And I'm like, you're getting rid of the best part, the most nutrient dense part, the most delicious part. Such a shame. Worked out to my advantage. But like, yeah, on more than one occasion, I remember like walking home from the butcher shop to my house, holding like a bag of like calf's brains or like a bag of frozen blood and being like, how did I get here? Like, is this really my job?
So we want to know, I want to know how you got here from a girl that started out eating cereal with low fat milk to looking into calf's blood and veal brains or what have you. Like, how did you get there, Ashleigh?
So yes, I ate totally kind of standard, normal American diet. I come from a family that was, I think, is concerned with feeding their family in a healthy way as much as anyone else. But we weren't adventurous eaters. We weren't overly sort of knowledgeable about this stuff. And so I was born in the 80s and I grew up in the 80s and 90s, and we ate low fat stuff because that was healthy, and whole grain stuff because that was healthy, and whatever, Dunkaroos in your lunch because that's what kids wanted. Like that's sort of how I ate. But looking back, I can see in retrospect that I always had a tendency towards like animal protein, towards sort of the fatty, gristly, gamey, kind of really rich, delicious stuff. I always liked protein, animal protein. And growing up on the East Coast, like I was into like oysters and lobster and mussels and things like that. So I always was gravitating towards that stuff. And it sort of coincided when I became an adult and I was traveling and I was moving around for life and work. I was living in like New York City for a while, which has any kind of cuisine that you could ever imagine. And I was just having like a fun experimental phase. I loved food and I had this attitude about food that if it was new or different, I wanted to try it. Like I wasn't freaked out if I went to a place and they were like, oh, it's chicken feet, like I wasn't like, ew, that's gross. I've never tried that before. I'd say like, I haven't tried that before. I want to try it. And so I had that kind of like open mind about it, but that was also coinciding with me learning more about food and nutrition. And I had this sort of background through my work that was sort of like ancestral, paleo, primal kind of approach. I just think that's a really common sense approach for most people to start when they're looking for their optimal healthy diet. I know people can kind of tweak and make changes from there, but I was eating whole foods, paleo-ish approach. And I was learning about the importance of kind of nose to tail and honoring the animal and eating everything. And so I was starting to dabble in these things like, okay, well, maybe I'll try some liver because everyone says that's so healthy. And I just saw chicken hearts at the grocery store. Why don't I try that? And I was kind of playing around and I was sharing it a little bit and on social media and stuff. And people were kind of responding to me like, what are you doing? Like, what is that? And a lot of people were giving me like gross out emojis and like, you're nuts. But a lot of people were like, what are you doing? Like, I'm interested. I want to know more about this. And so as I was learning, I was starting to think there are people out there who are also interested in this, who could benefit from this.
Yeah. So you said that you knew that liver was healthy, for example. How did you know that?
I knew it because, I mean, this is my profession. Like, this was happening. I was already a few years into like working with Paleo Magazine when they were up and running and hosting a podcast and health coaching. And so again, because I was coming into the wellness health industry from this paleo primal, like following Rob Wolf and Mark Sisson and Art Devaney and Weston A. Price and all of these amazing sort of resources. And so I knew, generally speaking, that like animal protein sources were good. And I knew that nose to tail was good. And I knew that we should be seeking out nutrient dense foods. And so, of course, I kind of only was scratching the surface and I did a lot more research for the book, but I did always have that kind of baseline of knowledge, but realizing at the same time that even in our industry, even in our health community, and even people who eat meat, organ meats are still intimidating to a lot of people. They're still almost taboo for a lot of people. There's still this concept that if you didn't grow up eating it, it's strange and extreme and gross. While I have to preface that, of course, in most of the world and through most of history, it's been absolutely normal and commonplace. It's really more about like modern North American mainstream culture that thinks it's weird. So I have to recognize that because I get a ton of people messaging me saying like, of course, this is amazing. I eat this stuff every day. And, you know, I appreciate that. But yeah, so I knew that it was something that I wanted to pursue personally for my own health and to be more mindful about my own eating decisions, you know.
So let's talk about that. What makes these foods, these kind of different cuts, as you've been discussing, the blood, the brains, the liver, what makes them so healthy? Can you give us just a couple of reasons why we should eat them if we don't?
Yeah, I mean, I think, again, I'm speaking mostly to the animal protein eating community. Like, I'm not going on a crusade trying to get vegans to eat liver, but I'm saying to the vast majority of us who still do eat some animal protein or animal products and recognize the health benefits of those. We're talking essential amino acids that our bodies need to function, that we have to get from outside sources and that we get in the most bioavailable form in animal products. And then we're talking about micronutrients, vitamins and minerals that we need, that our bodies need to function. You're simply getting them in higher doses, more condensed, like nutrient dense doses in organs than you would from like muscle meat, for example. So if you're going to eat a steak or a chicken breast, you're getting protein, maybe you're getting some different like vitamins and whatever, you're getting way more of it in the organs. The organs are just where the nutrients are packed in. So like liver, which everyone wants to talk about, you know, you're getting your B vitamins, A vitamins, iron, phosphorus, selenium. Like I could keep going. Like the things that we often don't think about because our bodies are just using them and humming along well. And we don't often think about having like a micronutrient deficiency until something goes wrong. We get some blood work and it's like your iron's super low, your vitamin A is super low, whatever. Our bodies are really, really good at taking those nutrients out of animal products and even more specifically, organ meats. So if you're somebody who even, for example, wants to eat less animal products, because I understand that some people, they want to eat healthy, they recognize animal products are an important part of that, but they don't want to eat as much. A great answer for you is to look into organ meats because you can eat less and get as much or more of the benefits. You don't have to eat a 10-ounce liver steak every other night to reap really, really good benefits from the nutrition. You can eat like a couple ounces every few weeks and you're doing great.
Yeah, so it's ethical too because we're not being as wasteful. We're using all the parts of the animal.
Absolutely. I mean, I think that's a no-brainer. I think like we, you know, online, it can be very divisive, this nutrition conversation, you know, it can be very black or white. And if you do it my way, you're right. And if you do it their way, you're wrong. But I think that most of us, really most of us, whatever end of the spectrum we're on, we want to eat healthy and do as little damage to the planet, the environment, the ecosystem cause as little suffering as possible. I think we can pretty much all agree on that. And one of the ways to do that, if you're a meat eater, is to eat the entire animal, the animal that you're already accepted that you're going to eat for health and because you're a part of the life cycle and the ecosystem, and to use your dollars wisely by purchasing ethically, humanely raised and slaughtered animals and eating all of them and wasting as little as possible. It just makes sense.
Absolutely. So we said earlier you were on the standard American diet, and now you've transitioned into being adventurous. You make a good case for this being kind of fun and tasty, economical, ethical, the whole shebang. What cuts grace your table now the most, would you say, Ashleigh?
The most would definitely be liver, heart, and tongue. I think that they, for a whole host of reasons, namely they're nutrient dense, like I said, they're all great. I mean, heart has a ton of CoQ10, which is this great antioxidant that's so good for you. Tongue is absolutely delicious. It's the one organ that I would tell people, if you're going to like trick people into eating, I don't say you should, but if you're going to make a meal and not tell somebody what it is the most delicious. Like anybody would enjoy it if they weren't freaked out by what it was. So tongue is a great one. Liver, super nutrient dense, so versatile. You can hide it in other foods if you want to. I have no problem with that. But they're also relatively easy to find. Like all three of those cuts you can generally find at any butcher shop or specialty meat, grocery, whatever. And yeah, I would say I probably eat liver, like I make it into like a pate or a mousse, or maybe fry up some chicken livers wrapped in prosciutto or something once or twice a month. I probably make slow cooked, like shredded tongue for tongue tacos or to put in an omelet. I do that probably once a month. And heart is absolutely my probably number one. It's the number one cut that I would recommend to people getting started for a number of reasons as well.
It tastes so much like beef, just regular muscle meat, I guess I'd say.
That's it. Because it is a muscle, right? Like that's the other thing. I feel like a lot of people are worried about textural issues, and I understand that. But with heart, it's a muscle as well as an organ. So it has that kind of beefy texture that people are okay with, you know?
Yeah. And you mentioned earlier that there's kind of this ick factor or the gross out emojis that people are posting on your social media posts. I think it's mostly because it's intimidating because it's so far away from the way most of us, I would say, in the Western world have been raised. You know, again, we're not eating those cuts anymore. So if we're ready to make the transition as you have done to include more of these different cuts, it takes guts to go for it. Where should we start? What would you recommend for us to get going with it?
Yeah, I would recommend that, again, we don't have to go from like 0 to 100. Like you don't have to go from never touching organ meat to eating like raw kidney tomorrow. Like even if the internet tells you that's the best way to do it, you don't have to do that. You can ease your way into it, right?
Yeah.
I would say my very first step for people who are interested but intimidated is, if you're able, if you have the resources, go to a restaurant and have a professional do it for you. Like understand what these can taste like when somebody who knows what they're doing does it. So go to a Mexican restaurant and get tongue tacos. Like go to an Asian restaurant, get some pho, get some like tripe stew, get some foie gras or chicken liver, duck liver pate at a restaurant. Like it's surprisingly common if you look and you pay attention to find organ meats on restaurant menus.
Coming up, Ashleigh gives us more of her tips to help us enjoy organ meats. She also includes a simple recipe with chicken hearts and butter.
You're listening to the Wise Traditions podcast from the Weston A. Price Foundation. We pause now to recognize our sponsors.
Bubble and Bee. Our skin is the body's largest organ, and what we put on it can end up absorbed into our bloodstream. When ingredients matter, choose Bubble and Bee. Bubble and Bee's mission is to make clean products you can feel safe with. They contain no parabens, no artificial dyes, no xenoestrogens, nanoparticles, or artificial fragrances. Plus, they offer the world's largest selection of USDA-certified organic deodorants. There is an option for every skin type and body chemistry. They also offer organic facial care products that have super simple and effective ingredients. Bubble and Bee has so much to offer. Go to their website, bubbleandbee.com, to check them out. And when you go to checkout, use the code WISE for 15% off. Oh, and one other sweet feature with Bubble and Bee is that they are 100% behind their products. If you have any questions, just email the owner of the company directly at any time, so you can place your order there with confidence. Again, it's bubbleandbee.com and the code word WISE. And Optimal Carnivore, have you heard about their new Brain Nourish product? It's designed to improve focus, mood, memory, and provide better clarity and creativity. It's a unique, groundbreaking formula made from grass-fed beef brain and lion's mane mushrooms. It is the ultimate whole food nootropic to build a better brain. These two ancestral superfoods have been used for centuries to improve brain function and overall mental well-being, and they're now available for the first time in convenient capsules. Studies have shown that both ingredients are remarkable at improving cognition and brain health, both in the short and long term. They're guaranteed to have your brain firing on all cylinders, and they offer a host of benefits for health, vitality, and longevity thanks to the highly nutritious superfood ingredients. Each serving has 1,500 milligrams of organic lion's mane and 1,500 milligrams of beef brain. They only use 100% real mushrooms, organic fruiting bodies, which are rigorously tested for active compounds. The beef brain is sourced from the highest quality regenerative farms in New Zealand. You know, the mission at Optimal Carnivore is to make it easy for people to consume the most nutrient-dense foods on the planet, and they are batting 1,000 on this. Plus, they also plant one tree for every product sold, which helps the environment. They currently have a grass-fed organ complex that contains 9 organs, a grass-fed liver product, and the new Brain Nourish. So go to Amazon.com/optimalcarnivore and use the code Weston10 to receive 10% off all products. That's Amazon.com/optimalcarnivore and the code Weston10. This is Holistic Hilda, and you're listening to Wise Traditions. That's exactly what I've done with bone marrow. I was like, I have no idea how to get this wonderful, creamy marrow out of the bone. So I think the first time I tried it probably was actually at the Weston A. Price Wise Traditions Conference, because they would have it there. And I was like, this is amazing. I had no idea. So that is a great suggestion, Ashleigh.
Yeah, it's so easy. And then you get it out of your mind that like organ meats have to be this thing you sort of choke down because it's good for you. Like you can absolutely enjoy it. So that's my first recommendation. My second recommendation is to start small in terms of the actual animal organ that you are sourcing, because smaller animals tend to have milder flavors. So if you're worried about a strong flavor, maybe don't go for like the buffalo liver or like the bison heart. Like start with animals like chicken or duck or turkey or even lamb. Smaller animals are going to be milder tasting. So I would say go for that. And then thirdly, I would say start with the heart, like I mentioned earlier, because heart is on the scale of sort of organ meat flavors, it is one of the milder ones. And it's also has, like I said, that beefy texture that is very easy for us to kind of get our heads around. It's also extremely versatile. Like you can do so many things with heart that you can kind of make whatever you want out of it.
Well, again, I really feel like you hit the nail on the head with this book, because you have the section talking specialty parts from head to tail, and you go through demystifying what the kidney looks like, what you can expect if you order a brain or get gizzards in your chicken, right? So I love this. I think this is so helpful.
Thank you. I didn't want to make it scary and intimidating. That it already is, right? I wanted to make it like, this is simple. You can pick and choose. You can play with it. You can make it an adventure. Doesn't have to be scary. It can actually be fun.
And you also labeled recipes so we would know which were the easiest to begin with. Like, what are some of the easier ones that you post in your book?
Yeah, I mean, I've got a couple different like chicken heart recipes that it's funny because that was almost probably one of the first organs I ever started experimenting and eating myself. And I remember people messaging me and saying, how do you cook like chicken hearts? And I felt like answering like, I literally can't even make a recipe for you. You just put them in a pan with some fat and then you eat them. Like that's the recipe. But then of course, when I was kind of trying to get creative with the book, I came up with some other recipes, but they're so simple. Like you go to the grocery store, anywhere, you get a package of chicken hearts. It'll cost you a couple bucks. You rinse them off. You throw them in a pan with some ghee or butter or whatever fat of your choice, and you cook them and you eat them. Like it could not be more simple, and they're so delicious and just very, very crowd pleasing.
So that is awesome. Again, you demystify, you offer some really simple recipes, but I have to admit I was surprised by a couple too. Which is the most intimidating recipe that you mentioned in your book? I think there was one with bison heart. Is that right?
Yeah, I mean, that wasn't intimidating for me. I'd say the most intimidating one for me at the time was there's a recipe in there that is scrambled calf's brain and eggs. And Historically, eggs and brain actually go very well together because they have a sort of similar texture. But I remember, again, I bought these brains and they look like brains, and I had to like hold a brain in my hand and prep it and cook it. And I remember thinking like, all right, this is a little bit outside of my comfort zone, but I pushed through and I did it. And one of the things I'd like to say here that just is another kind of demystifying point, because a lot of people may not know this, is that generally speaking, the most intimidating looking organs tend to be the most mild, easy to eat of all of them. So like everybody's heard of liver, and liver just kind of looks like a cut of meat. It's not super intimidating looking. That's one of the stronger flavored organs that's actually challenging for a lot of people to eat. But things like tripe, for example, like stomach, has no flavor. It's chewy, it has a texture, but has no flavor. That's why it tastes great in like spicy stews, because it absorbs the flavor of whatever you're cooking it with. Brain has a very mild, delicate, creamy flavor that when you cook it and mix it in with scrambled eggs, you can barely tell that it's there. But you look at it and you're like, that's a brain. Like, I'm freaked out by this, you know? So it's interesting. This is what I encourage people to do with the book, is open your mind, get rid of kind of preconceived notions, and realize that you can change your mind about things. Like something can look or feel one way and you can have a completely different experience.
Actually, let's go back to the health stuff we were talking about a minute ago, because I know in homeopathy, they say like heals like, or like cures like. Have you found that like when you eat brain, I'm just wondering personally, or perhaps you have anecdotes from clients, that when they eat brain, their cognitive function improves, or when they eat heart, they feel stronger and more energetic?
Yeah, it's a really cool question. And I mean, obviously, I'm not a scientist. I can't tell you that any of this is really going to bear out. But it is interesting how, for example, brain is really high in cholesterol, right? Which, as we know, is a healthy fat that our brains use. We need cholesterol to function. So it makes very common sense that eating this healthy form of cholesterol is going to be good for your own brain function, right? And I will say personally that one of the reasons why I have put myself on this journey of organ meat eating and sharing it with the world is because I work very hard on being a healthy, robust, resilient human being. But it wasn't until I started incorporating organ meats into my diet regularly that I noticed like a leveling up in my health and energy and resiliency that shocked me. Like it really did, without sounding too over the top or woo woo. Like nothing makes me feel better than when I'm eating liver regularly. I really do feel like it supercharges my body. And I think it's because it's just this gift that has so many of the things our body needs. And so, yeah, I don't know if I can say like brain makes your brain work better, but I will tell you that liver and eating organ meats has had an incredible positive impact on my health.
Wow. Hey, another thing in your book that surprised me was that you included a dessert section, and some of these recipes like sweet cinnamon chicharrones and bone broth ice cream. I was like, what the heck? I didn't know you could make those things from those foods.
Yeah, well, I mean, I had to include a dessert chapter because I have a massive sweet tooth. Like I would get rid of salty foods for the rest of my life and just eat like sweets forever. And yeah, in my research, I was like, these things are very versatile. Like my favorite dessert in the book is the chocolate blood pudding, which is inspired by a very, very famous Italian chocolate pudding recipe where blood is used both as a thickener and also to enhance the flavor of cocoa, similar to how you might add like espresso or coffee to a chocolate recipe to kind of bring out the flavor. And it was one of the recipes also that my taste testing family and friends, who sometimes were more or less afraid to try my recipes, you know, I had to really convince them on this one. And they were like, this is incredible. It's so good. And I would have really missed out if I hadn't tried this because I was scared that there was a little bit of blood in it. So yeah, I mean, these foods are versatile. That's it. Like the ice cream, you're really just adding bone broth for sort of the nutrient density of it. It doesn't really impact the flavor. A lot of these foods are more versatile and subtle than you think.
Tell us the story of someone that you've worked with who you've seen change from, like you did, transitioning from a more regular diet, or maybe somebody was really big on carnivore, but they weren't eating these specialty cuts. Tell us the story of someone who made that change and what you observed in that.
Honestly, without kind of speaking directly about one person, I think that one of the things I'm most proud of is that I do some coaching, I do some one-on-one coaching, but what I'm really more proud of is how many folks have come to me through various online or social media communities and have said to me, I used to be vegan or vegetarian, or I used to just not care about food, or I used to have really strong opinions about how gross the way you're eating is. And after listening to you and watching some of the things that you do, I gave it a try. And I started incorporating more animal protein, or I started incorporating organ meats. And I'm sharing it with my kids now, and they love it. And I'm super excited. That kind of thing really makes me happy, not because it is my life's work to like change vegans' minds, but because it means that what I'm doing is not shutting people out. I'm not trying to be exclusive. I'm not trying to be judgmental of people who are not doing the same thing as me. I'm trying to show people options and show people a potential new thing they can try that may open up their minds to new experiences, that may provide some pleasure, that may provide some health. And I think, again, we live in such a divisive world where a lot of people are preaching great ideas and they're doing it in a way that is condescending or patronizing or aggressive. And they're losing maybe the idea of like who they're trying to reach, because we don't change people's minds by telling them what they're doing is stupid or dumb, or telling them they're dumb. Do you know what I mean? And so having people say, I used to be completely the opposite of you, and I listened to you a little bit and you made me think it was okay to try something different. That really makes me happy, because I think that's what this book is about, even more than organ meats. It's about being willing to kind of open your mind to new experiences and the benefits that can come from that.
Oh, I love it so much. It reminds me of Dr. Tom Cowan, who rarely gives unsolicited advice. And of course, he's a speaker and an author and an influencer and all that, but he waits until there's interest before he does it. And I feel like, in a way, by putting your stuff out, you're just putting it out for those who are ready for it. And if they're not, maybe they will be, or maybe they won't. But either way, you're not forcing it down their throats.
That's exactly right, because forcing it never works. If it worked, there'd be probably a lot more healthy people out there. But I mean, and I learned the hard way too, because I had friends and family members who have struggled, that I'm looking from the outside thinking, geez, if you just do X, Y, Z, you would feel so much better. And I tried in some circumstances in the past, I have tried to kind of push it. And guess what happened? Not what I wanted to happen. So yes, you live by example. You put out information you think is useful. You try to be open and friendly and like willing to hear from different people with different opinions. And when people are ready, they'll come to you. And if they don't, that's because they're not ready, and that's not up to you to decide. You have no control over that.
100%. So thank you for your heart. Thank you. That's a funny thing to say when it's a guts conversation. Anyway,
yes, I love it.
I do appreciate your approach and what you've put out into the world. So thankful, Ashleigh. I want to pose to you now the question I like to pose at the end. If the listener could do one thing to improve their health, what would you recommend that they do?
All right, this is going to be where my bias comes in, but especially for women, eat more animal protein. I mean, eat more animal protein. I think that generally a lot of people aren't eating enough. A lot of people aren't eating enough protein. There's so many different kinds and so many different preparations, and you can find something that works for you and that you enjoy, and just be willing to give it a shot. Have fun with it. Don't force anything. Don't eat because you feel like you have to. Just have fun. It's a journey. We're all on it. We're all learning. Eat more protein.
Excellent. Well, thank you, Ashleigh. I appreciate your time today.
Thanks, Hilda. This was awesome.
Our guest today was Ashleigh Vanhouten. Go to her website, ashleighvanhouten.com, for her blog and other resources. She even has a mini ebook available with organ recipes that's free. And I'm Hilda Labrador, the host and producer of the podcast for the Weston A. Price Foundation. You can find me at holistichilda.com. I have a few free PDFs there too. And for the transcript for this podcast episode, visit our website, westonaprice.org, and click on the podcast page. And now for a letter to the editor from a recent journal. As a Weston Price member and co-chapter leader, I've learned many techniques over the years for raising and cooking nutrient-dense food. As my diet has shifted from sugar-based to fat-based, I've grown to prefer the foods I've learned about through WAPF. So when I travel, I bring special foods with me, including raw milk yogurt and cheese, bone broth, soaked almonds, and liver pate. Once when I was traveling to Wyoming, I immediately began asking where I could purchase raw milk. I found out that it was legal to sell, and the neighboring state, Idaho, even sold it in stores. But no one seemed to know who carried it or how to get it. My children, their friends, and I quickly drank my broth concentrates, and then we were out of our accustomed foods. For a moment, I was frustrated, but then I remembered the Weston A. Price chapter leader food list. I went to the back of my winter 2021 Wise Traditions journal and looked up chapters for Wyoming. Yes, there was a group in Buffalo, and Susan Pierce was a chapter leader, so I sent her an email. To my delight, a few hours later, Susan contacted me with a list I needed. This sounded promising, but the farms and stores were all a few hours away by car, and some were over mountain ranges and were about to have a strong blizzard, so she searched some more. And one of her contacts told her about a special one-time winter farmers market taking place only 3 hours later that day in Jackson, the town nearest us. She assured me there would be a farmer there with raw milk, and we made plans to go. When we arrived, the market was an incredible sight, a small community of about 20 farmers with raw milk, raw cheese, raw cream, even skyr, a cultured dairy product, all kinds of meats, fresh juices, and line-caught Alaskan salmon. There were sourdough breads, vegetables and fruits, tallow, skin creams, honey, and even live music. I felt like I had stumbled upon the Holy Grail. This experience helped me better understand how to present our own food list in our community in Vermont, and I've also gained insight about the food list and who might benefit from this information. Thank you, Weston A. Price Foundation, for prioritizing food lists as a primary activity of each chapter. This is a letter from Lee Marinoff, a co-chapter leader in West River, Vermont. And actually, I've had Lee on the podcast. Hey, Lee, if you're listening, good to hear from you. And thank you for pointing out that the chapter leaders are here to serve you. You guys, wherever you travel, even internationally, please check the list of the chapter leaders that may be near you. It is definitely in our journals, but also on our website. Just click on the button or the tab that says Find Food and Local Chapters, and that will set you off in the right direction. And thank you for listening. Stay well, my friend, and remember that all shall be well, and all shall be well, and all manner of things shall be well.
On behalf of the Weston A. Price Foundation, thanks for listening. We have many free resources to support you on your health journey. Visit westonaprice.org to find podcasts, articles, videos, and more. You can also find a local chapter near you for help in finding sources of great food. We invite you to support the Foundation's mission of education, research, and activism by becoming a member. Thanks again, and take care. Wise Traditions is a project of the Weston A. Price Foundation for wise traditions in food, farming, and the healing arts. The content on this podcast is provided for informational purposes only and is not intended to substitute for the advice provided by your doctor or other healthcare professional. It is not intended to be, nor does it constitute healthcare or medical advice.